Joined by Max Kogler, the CEO and co-founder of PingPod. A lot of table tennis fans should know about PingPod now because it's spreading like wildfire, especially across the east coast of the US. It's an automated table tennis pod. It's app controlled. You unlock it. You can basically use it around the clock. It's become a really great innovation. And of course, Max is also someone who's very enthusiastic about the sport, loves to play. Great competitive player with some pretty mean shots from way off the back of the table sometimes. Max, great to have you with me.
Thanks, Matt. Really appreciate it.
The topic that I thought would be most apt for us to talk about is bridging the gap between recreational table tennis and pro table tennis. That's kind of like, especially in the US, is a huge undiscussed or unsolved problem in table tennis, because you have these interviews and they're like, oh, what's table tennis like in the US, and you expect them to go, it's great, everything's going fantastic, but actually the answer is usually, well, as a recreational sport it's huge, but on the professional side it's a little bit stagnated, and there isn't really like a link between both. But hopefully PingPod can solve that up. I'm going to start off in the beginning to talk about PingPod. Some people might not know about it because it's mainly in the US. You launched in February 2020, which is right before the pandemic. How long did you spend planning and going over? I mean, the execution for this project is not an easy task. And what was your planning stages? The inspiration for PingPod, and how did you feel like the pandemic impacted your launch? Because I know obviously like for WTT, they launched right before the pandemic and it really hurt them. But having a sanitized private pod, not necessarily a bad thing at that time.
Yeah, 100%. Again, thanks for having me. I just want to say up front that I'm going to try to give a lot of shout outs to people today, so bear with me.
Go for it.
Because, we what we've built so far is really the product of a lot of people's blood, sweat, and tears. And I feel like I can represent a little bit and, tell the story. But, there has been some seriously inspired hard work behind the scenes. So, again, just a little preamble here, because there've been a lot of people involved. Yeah. So to your question, planning and how it all came together. We incorporated in July 2019. Wrote a business plan, pitch deck, raised money, got an architect, I got a software developer. Our first software developer was actually Christine Cha. You probably know Christine.
I know Christine, yeah.
She's another aficionado. Yeah. She was amazing to get us started off in the right direction. She was, not just a developer, but also a designer and, UX, UI, all of that. We just got right out of the gate with her. Scoured the earth for locations, ultimately found a couple. Then the one location that really we wanted to hone in on, we negotiated the lease. You can imagine, right? If you go to a landlord in 2019 and say, listen, we're gonna create a table tennis club, and there's gonna be nobody working there, and it's gonna be inside of a building where you have a bunch of condos upstairs. Most people were just kind of shaking their heads. It's like, wait a second, how's that safe? How, do you have any precedent? How's that going to work, right? So it takes a lot of convincing, and this one particular landlord took a chance on us. I also have to say that, between us three founders, Ernesto, David, and I, we had to put down sort of our personal money for guarantees, if in case it doesn't work or any security concerns and whatnot. Fast forward, we now have 17, 18 locations, depending if you count the ones in Miami, that are opening up in the next couple of weeks. But we now have people kind of knocking in our doors and asking whether we could be part of their building, particularly in condos, universities, different places, because it's such a cool amenity for the people that are living there, and for that particular block, let's say. So we've now become a draw, and sort of the tables have turned a little bit, pun intended. So yeah, so we started on the Lower East Side, and built the first pod. Ernesto, David, and I were on the ground, like laying flooring and making sure everything is sort of up to snuff. And we wanted to build something that is really, really good for great players, but also draws in and bridges that gap. People that are not great players, I haven't been playing are not at any USATT levels or anything like that, just casual folks that kind of enjoy the sport or enjoy it as, recreational activity. And so there was a lot that went into it to kind of cater to all of that. And then we opened up, like you said, in Feb 2020, right into the pandemic, but it was pretty fast. I mean, not as fast as MLTT, but we had to build a little bit too. Yeah. So that was sort of the the planning, building, and timeline for our first pod. And of course, the pandemic came, and we were forced to close down, but only for a few months. We opened back up again, I believe it was June 2020. And you're 100% right, because we have this kind of setup where there's no employees. Of course, we have people that come in regularly and restock the fridges and clean and all of that and disinfect back in the day. But it was sort of the perfect business that allowed people to still come together during that time. And we've had a lot of feedback during that time, basically telling, some of our customers wrote us personal emails thanking us. Some of them were to the extent of like, thank you for saving my life. I was extremely depressed sitting at home, not being able to go out or not being able to meet or do anything social. All three of our co-founders were all table tennis addicts. We called ourselves addicts. In fact, I don't know if you know about this group. I'd been addicted to table tennis for a few years, and I started playing at Spin. And we had an awesome group there. We literally called ourselves Table Tennis TT Addicts, and it ended up being a Facebook group as well. And we were scheduling, doing things. Here's one of the shout outs I got to do for my fellow addicts. Gordon Ho, I don't know if you know Gordon, Brett Coven, Johnson Lee, Andy Goldstein, Clemens Wan, Miguel, all of those guys. I'm surely forgetting a bunch. But these were just great guys. We used to meet, all the time, and all of us had incredible passion. Spin is great. I mean, Spin is a great place. I think Ryan was talking about it as well in one of your podcasts. And but the one thing that happened there is there are a lot of distractions there from the actual game, right? And as all of us got a little better over time, there's beers and mood lighting and, not enough space and all of that kind of stuff for sort of people that are a little bit more purist. And so I was talking to Ernesto Ebuen, and we started thinking about maybe building something to complement Spin, right? Something that focuses on the game and the sport rather than the party. And I think most listeners will probably know who Ernesto is, but for those of you who don't, I mean, he's an icon in table tennis in the U.S. and the Philippines. 6-time Philippine national champion, former #1 in the U.S. And most of all, I don't know if Matt, you've ever kind of taken a lesson with him or I've seen him coach at tournaments. For me, he's literally the best coach I have ever had in any sport. Phenomenal person. And I remember when he coached me for the first time, and he knew everything about my game. He said, I know you do the no spin serve to the middle to set yourself up for the backhand, but you got to be able to. And I was like, how do you know this? Like, you never seen me play. And he was coaching, while I was playing 3 tables over back in the day. So anyway, I digress. So maybe a little bit of the origin story. Ernesto ran this small pop-up club in the Upper East Side, and we got to talking to build something more substantial, like I said. And then we started looking at real estate. 15,000, 20,000 square foot places, like big places. Um, and during that process, our real estate agent actually said, listen, there's another group that wants to do exactly the same thing. And they were using the same real estate agent. And so they said, they really want to meet you guys. And it turns out it was David Silberman and Chad, his cousin. And they wanted to meet us. So we met. And David and Chad were very enthusiastic out of the gate about teaming up. And Ernesto and I, mostly me, I was not very keen because I felt like I had the business side covered. I had the passion covered. Ernesto had actual expertise in the sport. And,
yeah, you've already got it.
Exactly. And I was like, why would I, and then David is an extremely persistent guy. And in this process of him being persistent, I learned a lot about, he's very eloquent, very well-spoken, very smart, very strategic and all of that. At one point, he kind of just broke us down. And I was like, okay, fine, let's just team up, right? Basically, I was like, okay, I can't take this anymore. And he seemed to be smart enough. And Chad ultimately ended up kind of staying at his job. He had a really good kind of setup. And by the way, Chad recently joined us, like 4 years later. So welcome home, Chad.
Nice.
He just joined us a couple of months ago, which is awesome to kind of have the band back together. But David, Ernesto, and I essentially said, okay, we're going to do this together. And at one point, David came to us like a month later and said, listen, I have a better idea than building a big club. Let's call it PingPod. And this is literally how he pitched it to us. He said, okay, let's call it PingPod. Think about a network of autonomous table tennis pods. There are smaller locations. All are app controlled. You use technology to get in. You can stay open for 24 hours. And you have it at the ground level with windows so people can see in. You put some cool tech in there. You make it cool. You don't make it stodgy. You allow people to see how cool this sport is from the outside. And all the marketing is going to be done by people walking by. And that was his bit.
And you guys executed it so well. Because when I went to Brooklyn for the launch, you go out onto the corner and you just have this, in the evening, it's kind of like starting to get dark. You have this big, bright, pink lit up PingPod, and the whole front of it's glass, and you can just see through the front. It was so cool. It was really like one of the coolest things that I've seen since I came to the US for table tennis.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think it's both, right? It's that his vision was so clear, right? And he had it basically all lined out in his head. And then, my initial response was, yeah, this is cool. This is really cool, but it's never going to work. A ground floor space in Manhattan or in New York is just way too expensive. And his answer was like, he whipped out a spreadsheet with 25 tabs, right? He was a banker before. And so I looked at the spreadsheet. First of all, one of the best spreadsheets that I've ever seen. I've seen plenty of them. I'm not proud of it, but spreadsheets used to be my thing. So, and I looked through the numbers. I was like, okay, where's the rent? It's like, yeah, I already called a couple of landlords. This is where we're, and he put all the economics in there. He modeled it out, for 10 years, all of that stuff. And I just like try to poke holes in it, and I just couldn't. By eliminating the labor component, or the vast majority of it, like it made this a really, really feasible business proposition, and break evens were less than 20% of occupancy, right? Which is crazy to think that you don't have to fill this out of the gate to actually have unit economics be profitable.
Yeah.
And so I try to poke holes in it, and then he pitched it to Ernesto after me. It was funny because Ernesto immediately, he didn't have my response. He was like, "Oh my God, this is the coolest thing ever. Let's do it." And that's kind of how we got started. And then of course, we incorporated, did all of that, the stuff that I told you before, and then got our first pod up and running in Feb 2020.
I feel like PingPod is a really, really positive step in the right direction. Especially like now you've started having some small tournaments. I saw one tournament recently, I think it was last weekend, in one of the pods, which is like, that's like a big step forward.
Yeah.
To put like a tournament where recreational people are going.
By the way, shout out to JOOLA at this point. I know we're on the JOOLA sponsored podcast. That's not why. As you know, we have a fantastic partnership. We're exclusive with JOOLA, who is providing all of our equipment, including the tables, the rackets, all of that stuff. So as people go on this journey, they go from the house paddles and the PingPod paddles to JOOLA equipment, and then they get it at one point, more and more spin, and they get to understand how spin works. And then, before you know it, they buy the racket and the sheets, and they glue them on and all of that. And we all know how that works, but that's like 0.04% of people that play ping pong that do that. And it's this huge funnel, right? And I think we just want to make it easy and accessible so that people can actually go on that journey. And at the pod, you could do everything, right? And we're open, like you said, 24 hours in a lot of locations. We have a ton of dates that go there, Thursday night, Friday night. A lot of people come for an hour to play a little bit in the private pod. You can turn on your music, and, there is definitely not competitive. And it all matters how people want to be competitive.
Yeah.
What we wanted to do is kind of bridge that gap, and there was a big space in the middle, I think. And, the key there was we wanted to make it easy and accessible. So one of the things about having many locations is that it's much closer to everybody's home, right? The catchment area from which you're drawing is much smaller. You don't have to make it a destination. It's in your neighborhood, right? That was the idea. Make it so easy, you just walk downstairs. Easy also in terms of booking, right? With the booking system, just super straightforward. Nice flow, everything. And then make it less stodgy, more fun, right? Less like, sweaty, stodgy, more fun, build community events, things like that. And then the other thing is just kind of make it cool. There hasn't been any real innovation in table tennis for 100+ years, right?
Agree.
Sure, they made the ball a little smaller in plastic, and they made, there's a cyber shape. There's some things going on, but like no real difference maker, right? And so what we wanted to do is,
when the shape of a racket and the color of the rubber, if that's the biggest innovation that's come in the last century, then you should really take a step back and look and think, man, we should really try and do something.
I mean, I fight with people at tournaments all the time about being able to wear a hat. You're not allowed to wear a hat because my hair is all over the place. I can't wear a sweatband, etc. I mean, you probably, it might have had. I know. I don't think I've seen you without a hat for a long time. But exactly. It's pretty stodgy. So in any case, so we want to make it cool and build technology to support the play, right? And build in features like the replay, digital scoreboards, and things like that. So you go to a pod, you're like, wait, whoa, hey, hang on a second. This is kind of cool. And we felt like to bring people together, I know it sounds really cheesy, but it's truly the mission of what we want to do. Bring people together through technology, right? But into real life is absolutely key. And that's where we can focus on the things that, we have in common, right? I don't know when I'm playing so-and-so, whether they're voted for whoever they're voted for. I don't care because we're playing table tennis, right? And this is what's getting lost with sort of the virtual world. And so, our chief strategy officer, Ben Borton, he coined this phrase. I also call him a chief blog officer. He's written a number of blogs on how we think about this. pingpod.com/blog. Check it out. But he coined this phrase like, use your phone to put down your phone, right? Use your phone to make a reservation, to find people to play with, and then you put it down for 2 hours to play.
That's perfect. We've talked also a little bit about the social media side as well. Now, obviously, like, you're probably not directly involved in like all of the social media posting because there's a shit ton going on. Like PingPod is posting like crazy, and there's so much variety. But one of the things that I like about it is that it breaks away from this mold of posting about table tennis is always like great points. It's always like high level stuff. And I feel like the environment in the content for PingPod, like being in the pods, kind of makes people like feel more relaxed about it. It's not like, oh wow, like this is some high level training center, but you know, that's a miles away from me. But also like just these tutorials and the coaches having fun, and you're just showing like regular players who are showing up to have fun. And I feel like it's really developed like a personality of its own. I don't even know where I was going with the question. It's just become a passing comment. How important do you think the digital strategy is when it comes to promoting PingPod and trying to spread? I mean, you have, you know, large email lists, and the content's obviously become really important for you guys. But when you look at the content and you go, okay, you know, this is a tutorial that's literally teaching somebody something that a professional table tennis player would probably go, it's like quite a mundane tutorial, but it relates perfectly to the people that you're trying to target.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, great question. You're right. We post, you know, great points from all the players that you just listed, you know, that are all PingPod sponsored. But we also do like, how do you hold your racket, right?
Yeah.
Like as easy as that. And then we have a lot of user generated stuff too. And one of the things that I mentioned before
the
was
replay button. Yeah, please.
The replay button.
I don't know why
exactly.
I'm asking this. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, and that question is exactly answered by that. So we have inside all of our pods, we have a replay button that's next to the table. And when you have a cool shot, you go over and press the button, and then that replay of that point, not just a shot, that point will immediately be in your profile, and we'll email it to you afterwards. And in a couple of weeks, we're actually going to have it on the screens in real time, right? You can see it. So you can use it as bar, right? Like, did it hit the edge? Did it not? Did it hit the net? All of that. You can do it like that. The other one is that people, I don't know, you know, Ben also says this. He says, like, you know, never go short narcissism, right? People love to see themselves play, right? And when you have a cool shot, I remember when I was at, you know, a different place, I'm like, I hit a shot. In this day and age, everybody's on the phone. You know, people don't even watch you anymore. If you have a group of people, I'm like, did you see this? And people are like, no. And then nobody saw it, right? Except for your opponent, maybe, and they may not have even paid attention. And it's like these moments are lost forever, right?
Yeah.
And so unless you put up a, you know, tripod and all of that, like, so out of the gate, this idea of the replays was really important to us. And, you know, believe it or not, we ended up being able to file for a patent for that because it's actually user triggered, right? The people playing and being filmed are triggering what should be the replay. And what's happened now is that we're selling, and I say selling because we charge 50 cents for it, but only really because, first of all, there's obviously some costs related to hosting and transactions and all of that. But the other thing is we don't want people to spam us, right? If it's 100% free, people are just clicking it all the time. And we've had that, trust me, like kids and all of that. So, but we know, like, people, like, we sell tens of thousands of those every month. And people love seeing themselves play. Not only is it a cool point, but also a funny point, right? We actually have a channel on it. We have a community Slack. If you want to join it, we have like 3,000 or 4,000 people on there.
I didn't know about it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's super cool. There's a channel in there, best replays, and then there's a channel of best funny replays, right? And so one thing that has happened is that people press the button when someone gets hit in the eye or stumbles over something or totally whiffs the ball. And that is the thing that you're talking about, which is like, again, it's kind of, you know, it kind of bridges the gap between people who are only pressing it because it's an amazing, you know, banana flip, or, you know, and to everybody, what is amazing to them is what's amazing to them. Good place to mention that, you know, we actually have a second business line called Pod Play. where we essentially
Right.
took
Yeah.
everything that we built inside of PingPod, all of the tech, the hardware, the software, all of that, the autonomous part, and becomes portable into other sports and other venues, right? Pickleball, for example.
Yeah.
We all love table tennis, of course, but like any kind of racket sport is awesome, right? There's a lot of hype around pickleball right now. A lot of people building, and we're licensing our technology to some of these venues. For example, City Pickle here in New York, and so forth.
Right, which is huge.
Um,
Yeah. So you have like a whole range, and you have people who, they might not be like the highest level coaches, but they're so relatable to people that will walk in off the street, and people have an amazing time. They learn the basic techniques, and it was like one area in the beginning I was just like, it's a very interesting strategy, and I wonder where they're going with it. But over time, you really start to understand. If you look at other table tennis clubs, like if you take a 2700 level Chinese coach and a walk-in that just wants to learn how to play table tennis, there's such a huge disconnect there. And I think there's like this whole mentality around, I mean, I have so many opinions about this, and there is going to be another podcast on it at a later date, but the ideas of what a good coach are in the US and worldwide are often incredibly broken. So,
yeah.
I mean, obviously, this is something that you and Ernesto probably talked about a lot, and you the whole team talked about. But what was that philosophy where you said, hey, let's do something different. Let's get relatable people, regardless of what their playing level is. If they can teach people, let's get them in our pods.
Yeah. By just by you asking this question, like it makes me feel like you really understand what we're trying to do. It's really great coming from you. I know. I mean, you are a high level coach, right? And there's a lot of opinions on. Yeah, there's a lot of no, but seriously, I mean, you would be at the very top level of our coaching staff, but there are a lot of opinions and a lot of snobbery around, like, oh my God, you're not 2300, 2400 and above, can't really be coaching anybody. And I think that's been holding the sport back. It's the same reason why the club system is kind of broken in a way. And so what we've tried to do is, we try to make coaching more accessible from both directions, from the customer point of view as well as the coach's point of view, right? So we've allowed coaches to become coaches who don't necessarily have all the accolades, right? In the past, you had to have a name or accolades or special, rating or whatever. Now, you also said we have a range. Like, don't get me wrong, we have tons of incredible high-level coaches. A number of Olympians. 2,700 former plus. But frankly, you don't really need an Olympian to teach you the basics, right? And then additional, we also solved the scheduling issue, right? We built software that allows the coaches to have a dashboard where the coaches can put in their availability, and the customer can then pick the coach and the table at the same time, make it super easy, right? It lines everything up. And then, the coach gets a ping, they decide, they say accept, and, off they go. And we have tons and tons of people that come from the street and we're like, okay, I can get someone that's a club coach, right? They're also, they're starting at $50 an hour, right? It's and then we even have this concept of sort of getting a hitting partner, right? For those, you essentially get, you don't pay anything, and we tried that for a little bit, but the whole idea is like, yeah, you get all the way down to someone like teaching, showing me the ropes. Right. That doesn't mean that our coach onboarding process isn't rigorous, right? We're still very rigorous because we want people to be good coaches first and foremost. Yeah. And so here I should mention, Matilda Ekholm. I know Mati very well, but Mati is our director of coaching. She's incredible. In all kinds of ways. I remember when I first saw her, she came to watch us build the first pod. She came to New York right during that time, and I was just like kind of starstruck. I'm like, oh my God, Matilda Ekholm. I was because I've been watching her play, and she's been around for a long time. and she's very, very bright, right? Imagine you're a professional athlete for 25 years and then you go to a startup, a venture funded startup, right? And have to build and create a department with all of the things that
Yeah.
go with it.
Yeah. When PingPod first launches, I mean, it's the same with everything. I mean, Major League Table Tennis is kind of in the same space. Like new things launch and you start to think about them and you think, okay, is this going to work, or does this make sense, or does that make sense? But I feel like PingPod is one of those things that the more I've started to understand about it, and honestly, I think y'all are in the same boat, where once they really started to understand how impressive the tech was behind this, the market that this was like intentionally going after, I think people just become significantly more interested and to really get behind it more. So I think this podcast has been really great to help people understand how PingPod is kind of become a catalyst for that journey from recreational to pro. And that kind of like ties everything up really nicely. So really appreciate you taking some time to come on and talk some Smash, but not too much.
Yeah, no, Matt, appreciate it. Also, just by looking through your questions, like I can see that you have made that journey as well. It's like, whoa, what is this? This isn't, and
Yeah,
ultimately being open to having this new system. We have 75 or 80,000 customers now. It's crazy.
it's huge.
1,000 of those were probably playing regularly before, and the
Yeah,
79,000 that we added are now new people in
new
that big
people.
funnel,
Right.
right? And
Yeah.
it's just, per location, just going to keep increasing. So we're super happy and very, very grateful to those folks, right, that have given us a chance. Our community is everything. Uh, these are, again, these are cliche kind of phrases, but we truly, truly believe that, right? Like I worked in finance and did all kinds of meaningless things, but this is the thing that blows my hair back, right? And getting people into becoming an addict, like I am. A
Perfect.
good addict.
Yeah, in a good way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Max.
Awesome, Matt. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.